new study published earlier this week had proved the link between poverty and brain development. So now this study basically gave families of infants cash payments and found that it led to those children actually having higher cognitive skills later in life. So now the study is actually called the Baby's First Years Study. And what it did is that it enrolled 1,000 pairs of mothers and infants, generally low income, into a multi-year program in the metropolitan areas of New York, New Orleans, Omaha, and the Twin Cities. Now the mothers were divided into two different groups. 40% received a high cash gift of $333 a month. I wouldn't say that's great, but hey, look, they're low income. In fact, the average income reported here is about $20,000 a year. So that $333 a month, that'll go a long way. Now the remaining 60% were actually given a low cash gift of about 20 bucks. So, and that lasted for about several years of their kids' lives. So now all infants, by the way, who were involved in the study were considered to be generally healthy. And as I said, the average income for the family is about $20,000 a year, not very much. And also the mothers and infants involved were members of minority groups, Black or Hispanic. So now the results of this, again, were incredibly interesting. So what they did is that they recorded the brain activity of 435 of the infants. Regardless of the size of the cash gift their mother received, researchers, when they did that, observed higher brain power in about 3 out of the 4 brain waves in the high cash group. So now what does that mean? It basically suggests simply that children whose families had more income from these gifts, they actually dealt with less poverty and had better brain development. Interesting. So now the researchers acknowledged that family income had previously been associated with developmental differences in child brain development, but it had been unclear in the past whether it was directly associated with poverty or if it had more to do with factors that correlated with poverty. But they found that due to the randomized nature of the study, researchers concluded that giving money to families living in poverty resulted in a change in their infants' brain activity in a positive way. Is that not the most amazing, but also the most, yeah, no kidding, thing that you've ever seen? On the one hand, it's like, oh my God, giving them just $333 a month made their children's brains better when it comes to cognitive development. But also it's like, yeah, of course, you give poor people more money, and yes, they're going to do better. They're going to be less in poverty. And again, I think a lot of you may have heard of poverty brain. I myself suffer from poverty brain. And so it was one of those things where you grew up poor. Y'all know what I'm talking about if you've ever had it, where you're constantly concerned, constantly worried that you're going to be poor. That, you have to hold on. You don't know if the money is going to disappear. Even if you're doing well, there's always that doubt in the back of your mind. What if I'm poor tomorrow? What if it all goes away and it's all gone? And I need to be very, very concerned about how much I spend. Because you never know if it's just going to all disappear and you're going to go back to what you were living in, the way that you were living before. That's part of poverty brain. It's that constant anxiety. And so if you do something to alleviate, and by the way, that kind of anxiety is devastating to children. Not only that, but what's also devastating to children is not having enough to eat. Not having enough to eat, having to worry about, your parents being able to pay the bills. You're going to have heat, electricity. You're going to have, if your parents are going to fight over money, and then you're going to watch, and children, by the way, they internalize that, oh, they're fighting, it must be about me, I must be too expensive. That wreaks havoc on a child's brain. It really, really does. And so if you can alleviate those issues, then yeah, you're going to help a lot of children. Now, the study also noted that the patterns of neural activity, and this is also really important, observed in the high cash group were associated with higher language, cognitive, and social emotional scores later in life, setting them up for future success. Of course. Of course. Now, here's the thing. This doesn't mean that you need to be rich for this, right? No, of course not. It just means that we should, I don't know, provide people with a basic level of living to which they can survive and not be in poverty. We should eliminate poverty from our society, and we can do that. And we can actually do that. So now there's a couple of caveats that are important to point out as well, but don't actually contradict the study. So the study was limited as a result of COVID-19. About what? I should say a certain number of parent-child groups were unable to be contacted, or they were unable to get the full amount of data on some of those mother-infant study groups. The pandemic made it very difficult to collect that data in person, again, because you had to make sure that you weren't spreading COVID around. So I get that. So that's the caveat, really. That's the only one. Now, that said, when you have 3 out of 4 kids show higher cognitive abilities from the high cash group, that's incredible. And even if that missing data only finds out, or even if you expand the study further to a larger sample size, and you end up with what, 50%? That's still half of all children in these families that you give additional money to that now have a better shot at life. Why wouldn't you do that? 50%, why wouldn't you do that? In fact, one co-author of the study, Lisa Janishan, a professor at Duke University's Stanford School of Public Policy, called the results of the study, quote unquote, unprecedented. The study's findings on infant brain activity are unprecedented and really speak to how anti-poverty policies, including the types of expanded child tax credits being debated in the US, which are, by the way, unfortunately no longer debated because it's over, we've lost, can and should be viewed as investments in children. And that's what it is. It's an investment in the next generation. It's the same thing as like investing in student education. I hear this all the time. Student loans, specifically for kids to go to college, right? Oh, yeah, well, you know, we shouldn't invest in that. They should be able to pay their own way. But you understand, like, why the taxpayer should help by making college free and forgiving student loan debt is because that's an investment into the future. Those kids without debt, college students, they're going to go on to now be able to buy homes, buy cars, invest in the economy, work the kind of jobs that they might want to work instead of have to work because of, you know, high student loan payments. Do art, music, or create a business that's successful in their small towns. All of that stuff, that's a benefit to society. It's a benefit. Why wouldn't you want to do that? But unfortunately, we know that there's people who don't. Conservatives, neoliberals. I mean, conservatives are a good example of loving the fetus up until it's born and then wanting absolutely nothing to do with it. Whereas neolibs, you know, they're more like, well, you know, we'll give them a little bit of help, but not that much. Means test, means test, means test. Again, conservatives and neoliberal corporatists, like Manchin and Sinema, they killed the child tax credit, which again helped to raise 50% of children that were living in poverty out of poverty. That's over with. It's gone. And it's not going to come back. No way. But hey, at least they can say that they protected their donors from possibly having to pay a tiny little bit in additional taxation in order to help kids have a better shot at life. Great job. Great job.